Don't suppose you got a pass anywhere underneath that pretty dress?
I belongs to Master Giles, and this here his property.
You assassinate, girl?
Well, sir, I can get one.
You ain't going nowhere.
Movie opens in Virginia in 1809, where Nat is a young enslaved boy who often plays with a white child named Sam, the son of the estate owners. And one day, Nat again goes without porridge and suffers from hunger, basically learning early that privilege doesn't always come with a full breakfast. So seeing this, Nat's father sneaks out at night through the woods to find food, with young Nat quietly following him, and Nat witnesses the man being caught by a patrol searching for runaways, led by the brutal overseer Raymond, who wants to punish the fugitive. But the man fights back and seriously wounding one pursuer and smashing a stone over Raymond's head, knowing that if he doesn't resist, his family will pay the price and he's forced to flee, though not before hiding the food he found beneath the floorboards. The kind master who legally owns Nat's family tries to protect his people, but Raymond shoves him out of the cabin and is about to use his knife until the master's intervention stops things just in time, and later, master's wife, Mrs. Elizabeth, discovers that young Nat can read letters, something that surprises her enough to invite the boy into the house, promising to teach him to read and write while he stays there, meaning Nat will live at the estate for a while, even though his mother Nancy has no choice but to accept that her son is being taken from her temporarily. Inside the house, Nat sees a luxurious library, and Elizabeth explains that most of the books are for white people, and that there is a special book meant for someone like him, the Bible, which she uses to guide him, hoping to raise Nat as a young preacher. But just before Sam's father's death, he decides that Nat will be more useful working in the fields instead, and with that decision, Nat is sent back to a massive cotton plantation where he and his mother spend long, exhausting years filling heavy bags with cotton under the unrelenting sun. Yet Nat continues to preach and read scripture to the people working around him, urging them to keep their faith even as their hands are raw and their backs are breaking. And by now, Sam, the heir to the estate, has grown up too, watching all this unfold. While Reverend Hall starts to notice something unusual, the workers seem unusually calm and obedient, and it turns out Nat's preaching has helped them accept their harsh reality and bury any thoughts of rebellion, which from the plantation owner's point of view is like finding a free security system that runs on Bible verses. Meanwhile, Raymond keeps hunting runaways, and during one search, Nat picks up a toy dropped by a child, but the child's father suddenly attacks him, beating him viciously until Nat finally grabs the man's cane, and the man shouts to Sam, claiming he needs the sheriff because Nat attacked him, but Sam defends Nat. And on their way home, Nat witnessed people being sold like cattle, and among them is an 18-year-old girl about to be reduced to nothing more than entertainment for someone else's pleasure. And feeling deep sympathy for her, Nat asks his master to buy her, saying she would make a fine gift for the master's sister, and Sam steps in, outbidding the others and striking a favorable deal. But when they return home with their new purchase, the terrified girl, Cherry, lashes out at Nat like a cornered animal, until the women of the house stop Cherry and clean her up. Then Sam proudly presents Cherry to his sister Catherine, something Catherine has long wanted, and along with Catherine and Elizabeth, Cherry is meant to move into Catherine's husband's house. So Nat says goodbye to his new acquaintance and offers her a small bouquet of flowers. And sometime later, Nat's older brother Hark marries the woman he loves, and the enslaved community gathers for a modest celebration, clinging to joy wherever they can find it. Meanwhile, Nat continues preaching, and sometime later, Cherry appears in the church, and the moment Nat sees her, he's completely flustered and stumbling over his words and stuttering like his brain suddenly forgot how English works, and grateful for even a few seconds to speak with the woman he loves. He can't stop thinking about her until one night he can't bear it anymore and rides out to Cherry's house to confess his feelings and propose, and Cherry agrees immediately, and soon the two are married. Around this time, Reverend Hall visits Sam again and explains that neighboring plantation owners are willing to pay good money if Nat uses his sermons to keep their enslaved workers calm and obedient. And thanks to the income Nat can bring in, so Sam can finally start paying off his debts, and Nat's mother and grandmother watch as Nat and Sam depart for these neighboring plantations. Their first stop belonging to a wealthy owner named Rennell, who complains about hard times while cutting costs by feeding his enslaved workers only once a day, and he wants Nat to convince them that heaven is reserved only for those who are meek and completely obedient to their masters. So the starving, exhausted people are herded into a barn and forced to listen to biblical passages about submitting to harsh masters, and what Nat witnesses there deeply unsettles him, making him want to leave as quickly as possible, unable to shake the horror of what he's seen. Meanwhile, Cherry speaks about being taken from her family at just 13 years old, and she and Nat soon learn they are expecting a baby, while Sam continues to grow richer from the payments for Nat's sermons. And not long after, Cherry gives birth to a daughter, bringing real joy to both. Then sometime later, Sam and Nat arrive at another estate, but no one greets them at the entrance, so Sam steps away to find the owner, and in that moment, a dog is set loose on Nat. As the local manager, infamous for his cruelty, inspects the fields with a whip proudly in hand, deciding to punish an enslaved man who has gone on a hunger strike, and when the man refuses to eat his porridge, the manager's men brutally beat him, injure him severely, and then force the porridge down his throat with a funnel, all of it happening right in front of Nat and Sam, and it becomes clear that these are exactly the kinds of plantation owners willing to pay Sam because they fear Nat's religious influence even more than guns. And through tears, Nat tries to preach to these broken souls, but instead of his usual message of obedience, many hear something different, a quiet, dangerous call to stand up for themselves, while the white owners completely fail to understand the meaning hidden in his words. Later, Cherry goes out to fetch water and is intercepted by Raymond and his men, who accuse her of wandering too close to the woods, though it's painfully clear this is just a flimsy excuse to attack her, and at the time Sam is too drunk to intervene, so when he finally learns what happened, his solution is to quietly allow Cherry and Nat to spend the night at his mother's house, where Elizabeth says that God will surely punish those who treated the poor girl so cruelly, and somehow, Cherry survives the assault, and once she regains a bit of strength, she apologizes to Nat, even though she has nothing to apologize for, while Nat burns with rage when he learns who abused his wife, but Cherry begs him to let go of revenge. But Sam is acting as if nothing happened and orders Nat straight back to work, and that very same day he hosts a gathering of plantation owners at his house, asking Nat to say a prayer before dinner, and no one notices as Nat carefully weaves words about the oppression of the weak into the blessing, subtly pointing at the cruelty surrounding them. And soon after the feast, one of the guests behaving wrong with Hark's wife, Esther, and Sam does nothing to stop it, effectively allowing his servant to carry out the degrading order, while Nat tries to reason with his master, only for Sam to threaten punishment for everyone if they resist. And not long after, Esther stumbles out of the house in tears, with Hark rushing to hold her, crying out in despair and asking where God is now. Later, a libertine shunned by the local churches asks Nat to baptize him, but the plantation manager explodes in anger, insisting a black man cannot baptize a white man, but Elizabeth supports Nat, and the ceremony goes forward despite the risk of Sam's wrath. And when Sam returns and learns of Nat's defiance, he decides punishment is necessary, especially as Nat has begun openly confronting him about his inhumane treatment of people. So Sam orders Nat chained and viciously beaten in front of everyone, while Elizabeth struggles to hold back her tears, and Nat, battered and bloodied, doesn't cry out at all, instead wearing a numb, haunting smile, and they leave him chained to a post until late at night, with the manager warning that if Nat survives, life will only become worse for him, but even then, Nat remains unbroken. In the morning, Nat painfully forces himself to his feet and calmly says to Sam, "Yes, sir, I've learned my lesson." And Sam, acting like nothing ever happened, tells him to wash up and head back to the fields, while Sam himself sinks deeper into guilt and depression, drowning it all in alcohol because he knows exactly how wrong his actions were. Soon after, Nat's grandmother passed away, who born enslaved and dying enslaved, and for Nat, this loss is the final breaking point. So after her funeral, he asks his brother Hark to gather their most trusted people, and late that night, 6 men sit together by the fire, joined by a very young boy named Jasper from Rendell's plantation. Then Nat explains that for every Bible verse used to justify slavery, there is another that speaks of freedom, that good will rise against evil, that the first shall be last, and the last shall be first. And he points out a simple truth the masters fear, that there are far more enslaved black people than white owners, revealing that their main objective is to seize the armory about 15 kilometers, roughly 9 miles away, moving from plantation to plantation until they reach the right town. But Isaac, a fellow enslaved man who learns of the plan, desperately begs Nat to stop, asking if he really wants bloodshed, the deaths of their own brothers, and possibly even his own wife, but Nat is unshaken and convinced he has been chosen by God. And as time passes, Cherry remains bedridden, having always sensed an uprising might come one day, but never imagining her own husband would lead it, until it finally begins at Sam's estate, where Sam wakes up drunk to see Nat standing before him, and without hesitation, Nat offline him with a single axe blow, then overpowers the manager, and then entering his mother's quarters, tells her she won't need to work today because she is free, and with that the uprising ignites, as Nat gathers the enslaved people from Sam's plantation and declares, "We're all already dead," prompting a terrified Isaac to cry out, only for Nat to answer that they are now truly beginning to live. because from this moment on, they will serve God alone and not their masters. Inspired by Nat's words, the group moves from plantation to plantation, striking down those who kept them in chains, and when they reach the property of men infamous for torturing workers by ripping out their teeth, Hark personally takes it upon himself to confront these tormentors. But young Jasper, witnessing the brutal killings up close, is overwhelmed with fear and runs away. And later, on Rendell's plantation, the rebels are ambushed enslaved men because young Jasper warned rebels in advance, and they open fire on Nat's army. And that day, they lose yet another young member of their group. But Nat and the others press on toward the town, where they finally face Raymond Cobb's detachment, around 15 men armed with muskets and the rest with blades and clubs, and though outgunned, the former slaves refuse to retreat. But as Nat delivers a short, fiery speech that sends them charging forward, and the first musket volley cuts several rebels down, turning the clash into a bloody, desperate fight, during which Raymond wounds Nat and moves in to kill him, only for Nat to overpower him and drive a knife into him, killing him at last. The rebels manage to prevail and break into the armory, hoping for weapons, but instead they find crates filled with nothing but rocks, and before they can even process the betrayal, a military unit already waiting outside opens fire, killing almost all of the former slaves on the spot, and then a cannon blast wiped out many slaves, including Nat's brother Hark, leaving Nat as the only one to escape alive. And what follows is a full-scale manhunt, with enslaved black people across the state being hanged or subjected to brutal reprisals, until Nat secretly meets Cherry, who cannot even turn her head to look at him, and tells him the killings will not stop until the authorities capture him. And realizing this, Nat decides to surrender, walking into the nearest town, where an enraged mob nearly tears him apart until General Child stops the lynching, insisting on an official verdict. While awaiting execution, Nat spends his final days in jail, and when he is finally led through the crowd to the gallows, he is met with curses and even struck by someone in the mob, and when given a chance to speak his last words, Nat simply says, "I am ready," as the noose is placed around his neck, and in that moment he notices Jasper in the crowd, the same boy who once betrayed them. Years later, Jasper, now an adult, enlists in the Union Army during the Civil War, and though the uprising lasted only 48 hours, during that time nearly 60 plantation owners and their family members were killed, leaving behind a legacy that could not be erased.